congratulations, sir. It's gonna be possibly a nomination for Worst of 2017 in that top 10 list. And if it makes it into the top 10 list, it's gonna be bottom rung probably. It's gonna be at 10. And it kind of hurts me to say that a little bit. That's the... Out of all these Netflix movies he's been doing, Ridiculous Six, The Do-Over, I think he's got one more in his deal, unless I can't remember if they extended that deal or not, because this stuff's going over like hotcakes because idiots like me gotta watch and see what kind of train wreck awaits us. But god damn it, Sandy Wexler isn't terrible. I wouldn't even go so far as to say it's bad. It's there. And I'll admit, there are 3 moments that I got genuine laughs out of this film, which we'll get into. I can't really be irritated by this movie, which is weird because this is a movie where Sandler's putting on a voice. I mean, he's putting on this... he's parodying... little sneak preview for you. This is supposed to be kind of a satire of his actual... manager, whose name's Sandy Wernick or something like that. He shows up in the film in one of the moments that actually made me laugh. But this is supposed to be done kind of like playful, poking fun at his manager, but it's like done with respect in a sense. But he takes on, I guess, mannerisms of his agent, or his manager, I should say, but does it in his very Sandler-esque voice way, where he's talking like this all the time. You're gonna be a star, kid. You're gonna be, you're like an angel and a bird had made love and had a baby. Like, it's like that. It's one thing to be like little Nicky level of not investing in a character, but god damn it, Sandler... This is the most active I've seen him be in one of his own films, in one of his own Happy Madison productions, in a good couple of years. You've noticed it, I'm sure you have, since stuff like Jack and Jill, or even going further to that, like since stuff like even in Click. You can tell that there's this kind of detachment. He's like, I'm here for my paycheck, let's do this. Even though he's got everything to do creatively with these projects, he seems like the least invested person. This film, surprisingly, is the film where it looks like he is trying. It looks like he is actually putting effort into being this character and telling this story a little bit. And I can't fault him for that. Does it work? Does it go off like gangbusters? No, not really. There are moments, and that's why this isn't god-awful. This is why this movie's not really bad. It's just, it's not really interesting, and there's no reason it needs to be 2 hours. That's the main stuff I took away from this. It's very standard. You can tell plot beat by plot beat what's going to happen when you see within the first 15 minutes what the setup is. It goes back to like the mid-90s and talks about this talent manager, essentially, that Adam Sandler's playing, and how he manages like a very small pool of no-name talents. He's got a daredevil played by Nick Swartzen, who honestly isn't as irritating as he usually is. I gotta give a lot of Sandler crew regulars props in this film, because surprisingly they are not as they're either relegated to brief cameos, or their supporting players are not nearly as irritating as they portrayed other supporting players in the past. So he's got characters like Nick Swartzen's Daredevil character, who constantly fucks up his stunts. He's got Kevin James as this ventriloquist act, who... there were points in the movie I'm kind of thinking, this would be, with a little tinkering, this could honestly be a really great serial killer story if we focused on Kevin James's character, because he sits around with all of his dummies who apparently move free of their own volition. But of course, this is like a very... It's one of those movies where you can't tell like how grounded in some kind of reality this movie is, because then it'll go for really broad, weird, supernatural stuff where all the dolls move on their own, even though it's clearly him doing all the voices. So he's got the ventriloquist guy, who should be his own serial killer movie in a more serious light. He's got Colin Quinn, who at one point I thought was just playing mid-90s Colin Quinn, except I remember Colin Quinn not having a luxurious head of hair in the mid-90s. But no, he's playing like a very Dennis Miller-ish stand-up comedian, to the point where like he's kind of telling the jokes, but his delivery of the jokes and his timing is just weird and people don't get it. Twins, he's got this one lady who's always trying out for commercials, and then he's got Terry Crews later on in the movie, who again is one of the highlights of the film. But then he ends up taking on Jennifer Hudson's character, who he discovers at Six Flags in this barnyard sing-along type of stage show, and is instantly like taken with not just her voice, but like that's the story. If you can predict, of course, the Sandler character is gonna fall in love with the lead actress. Compared to what's been done with the romantic interest angle in movies like Pixels or stuff like Do-Over or even stuff like Click, I'll admit there's a certain sentimental sweetness to this story. It's not interesting really, but Jennifer Hudson is trying, and she is likable. I just feel she is a very likable personality in general, so you can tell like she's really trying. And when she's working off of Sandler, it's not irritating. He's not like this lecherous schlub. He is a schlub, but he's a very earnest and good-hearted schlub, essentially. His big issue throughout the whole movie, which you can see the moral of it coming, is that he's too much of a bullshitter. He exaggerates, he lies to kind of, because he thinks in his mind that's kind of sweetening the deal for a lot of his talent. At one point he lies straight to Arsenio Hall, who's playing himself, and Arsenio wants Jennifer Hudson's character to sing on his show, but then Sandy Wexler's like, well, that's too bad there, Arsenio, because I already booked her with Johnny Carson, and he's going to have her on next week. And so there we go. And Jennifer's like, I didn't know you got me Johnny Carson on the deal. And he's like, oh, I didn't. Johnny Carson hasn't worked for like 2 years. So, you know, just blatant like lying and bullshitting. The exaggeration of what you would expect Hollywood agents and managers to be like, essentially. And essentially that's his character arc, as he learns to be more honest, and that leads to being honest with her about his feelings. You can I telegraphed this whole movie from the slightest hint that he has some sort of romantic infatuation with Jennifer Hudson's character. I'm like, I know exactly where this movie's going, and you can say it along with me, people. She makes it big. He can't keep up with her ever-expanding circle of her posse and all the prestige she's getting and all the glitz and glamour. He can't keep up in that world. He lets her go. She goes on to make it big and have multiple boyfriends, but keeps coming back to him at certain points, and they reconnect their friendship. And then at the very end, he says what's on his mind and proposes to her, and even gets the approval of her dad, Aaron Neville, who's not playing Aaron Neville. I'm glad they didn't stretch reality too much like that, but he provided the third laugh for me at the very end of the film. But I can't be mad at this movie. It's just kind of, it sits with this very basic premise you've seen, and it almost feels very old school Hollywood in some of it, where it's the will they, won't they ever get together, even though you know they're going to get together because it's that type of movie. You know he's going to learn his lesson eventually. He's got to have his downfall and then his rise back. You know what's going to happen, and it does it very standard, but doesn't do anything so outlandish or so outrageous to either infuriate or intrigue me. It's a very basic plot. Again, there's no reason it needs to be 2 hours, though. There's significant portions of this film where I'm thinking, you could have truncated this, you could have cut out that. There's no reason. You can hint at the fact that as she gets more and more famous, she has multiple boyfriends. We don't need to actually see one of them. You could have just left it at the one guy who plays like the rival manager, who also happens to be her boyfriend for 5 seconds. He has a face-off scene with Sandy, essentially saying, you gotta let her go, man. She's just, you're holding her back, essentially. It's that scene, essentially. I say essentially a lot. Even despite the basic, predictable plot with this, despite it being way too long and prolonging certain sequences for really no reason or no real resolution. It's unbelievably harmless and inoffensive. I find it weird saying that considering the last two installments from this Netflix deal, because I remember having a more, let's say, irritated and volatile reaction to something like Ridiculous 6, where it's clear he's doesn't give a shit about this story or this character. He's sleepwalking through it. He and David Spade in the do-over. Again, it's just an excuse to go on vacation. It's flagrant, just absolutely no veil behind the fact that they just wanted to fork out a lot of money to themselves for luxurious shoots. Everything, I guess maybe because it takes place in the world of Hollywood, all the gratuitous cameos and all the lavish like production, it makes sense. Like the framing around the story revolves around people interviewing, or someone's interviewing all these celebrities at this gala event. You've got Conan O'Brien, you've got Jay Leno, you've got Pauly Shore, Lisa Loeb, Henry Winkler. You've got everybody essentially at whatever this event is. And about halfway through the movie, when I knew where this was going, I'm like, I think I know how this is going to wrap up. I think I'm going to find out at the very end what this event is that all these famous people are attending and what the payoff of that is. And spoilers, it's Sandy and Jennifer Hudson's wedding, or their official wedding, because I don't want to get into it, it's too stupid, but 20 years after the fact they get officially married. And so all these celebrities are there and they're getting interviewed about like Sandy Wexler, and they're saying all the stuff that you see him do. Like he's on the Atkins diet, so he doesn't eat bread and stuff like that, but he doesn't eat with his mouth closed, so he spits food all over the place. It's like he eats like a horse. You know, they have nothing but kind of like not very flattering things to say about him. And then they kind of chronicle the story. They pop in every once in a while during big turns in the story to kind of give their 2 cents. But I guess it makes sense for this type of film to incorporate a lot of high-profile names and bit parts. They have Sandy and Jennifer Hudson go to Quincy Jones's house for a party, and I didn't think Quincy Jones was going to show up. Honestly, I thought that it was going to be kind of like a stand-in, like you just see this much of their face, and that they weren't going to have the full-on cameo. But there he is throwing wine bottles at Sandy. Good on you, Quincy. So I'm not, what would typically piss me off about any of his other productions, I feel I'm being a little bit more forgiving in this regard, since it is a story about someone in Hollywood on the decline while one of his clients is rising to the top. The fact that it takes place in the mid-90s explains why people like Dana Carvey and Pauly Shore are here to get checks. I will admit, he does have Vanilla Ice in there, and thank God he only has one line of dialogue, and it's like, yeah, that's right, man. The less Vanilla Ice says, the better. He's just kind of sitting there or standing there with Penn Jillette and somebody else, and Penn Jillette's propelling most of the narrative, and you just see Vanilla Ice there in the background with a champagne glass going, okay, I showed up. So, despite Sandler again putting on a character that's mainly encompassed in a voice, there are moments where he does kind of shine through with some dramatic stuff. Nothing really heart-wrenching or nothing really that can make you invest more in the Sandy Wexler character, but again, I can tell a huge difference between this and something like Ridiculous 6, where his whole mantra is he's just a stoic-faced tough guy all the time, and I'm sure he purposely chose that so that way he could do the least amount of work. I feel because he's doing a movie that's sort of an homage to his manager, who I'm sure he respects and holds in high regard, that he is actually committing a little bit more to the characterization of Sandy Wexler than he would, say, whatever his name was in Pixels. Like, you can tell Sandler's trying not to be Sandler and to actually be a character in this movie. So again, I can't really fault him for that. It doesn't work, 100% of the time, but you can tell he's at least trying. And so, as much as it pains me a little bit, I have to give him some points for that. On to the 3 moments that made me laugh in this movie. First of all, let's just give it up for Terry Crews, because goddamn, no matter what shit show of a movie that guy is in, he always looks like he's having fun. And the fact that he looks like he's having fun makes me have fun whenever he's on screen. I've never been upset or bored by a Terry Crews appearance in any movie. The dude's just likable. He's got this fun energy about him. Again, no matter what the material, he seems always game, and so I like that about him. He plays this wrestler with a huge like Guile style flat top who rocks his opponents to sleep before Vulcan nerve pinching them apparently, and that's his character, and it makes me laugh. Whenever he's in the ring fighting, whenever he's talking to Sandler, he actually gets the most emotional moment with Sandler's character because his whole character arc is that he has to throw a fight essentially, or it's in the script for the wrestling match that he loses when he really wants to be the belt champion. And so Sandy sets things in motion to make sure that that happens. And the payoff for that, you see the genuine like sweetness in that moment, I guess, and that's mostly because Terry Crews' enthusiasm and excitement for winning. Like, I like Terry Crews. He made me laugh quite a bit when I first saw him. When he first debuts in this movie, and he's doing like his signature "I'm gonna rock you to sleep" move, like he's hunched over like this, like. And you just see it's Terry Crews giving you like that death stare, but doing this. I laughed. I can't help it. I thought that's a hilarious visual. The second time I had a momentary in this is at the end when Sandy is essentially asking Jennifer Hudson's character to marry him. And Jennifer Hudson's dad is established earlier in the movie as being this security guard at a prison in Alaska, and he's flown down to this observatory because the first time Sandy and Jennifer Hudson actually had a connection, they were out in Alaska with the Northern Lights, like eating hamburgers or something stupid. But so Aaron Neville's there as her dad, sitting in this planetarium observatory center with the Northern Lights going off, and Sandy Wexler is saying this romantic stuff to Jennifer Hudson. At one point, Kevin James, I'm getting into the really stupid part of this wedding thing. Kevin James shows up with two of his puppets, one of which is apparently an something ordained minister, and the other one is a rabbi. So Sandy's like, "Oh, you got everything covered. There he is. There's both of them." And then over in the background, you hear Aaron Neville say, "Just promise me you'll stay a Christian." I don't know why. I don't know if it's because it's so fucking out of nowhere, or it's because it's Aaron Neville singing that. Admit it, that was a pretty good Aaron Neville impression. But that bit made me laugh. It caught me off guard. I was kind of disappointed with myself that out of all the stuff that's happening in this film, that's what catches me off guard. Alright, whatever. So Terry Crews and Aaron Neville made me laugh. The third thing that made me laugh, the darkest moment in this film, I feel. Sandy's neighbor is this cougar, played by Jane Seymour, who is very lonely because her husband, played by the actual Sandy Wernick in a cameo, is basically on his deathbed apparently. Like he's comatose or paralyzed or something, I can't remember, but she's lonely. And so she says to Sandy, "If ever you see my tennis court lights flickering on and off, that's a signal to come over and keep me company." At one point that happens, and he comes over because he and Jennifer Hudson are not together right at that point. She went her own way, he went his. And so he's like, what the heck, I'll give it a try, sure. So he comes in, she tries to seduce him in lingerie with a scotch and things like that, and then like tackles him onto the bed. And she's making out with him, and he happens to look over. I'm laughing about it now, but honestly, when this moment happened, it freaked me out a little bit. You see Sandy Wernick on his deathbed with all this apparatus attached to him, like a ventilator, and the EKG, beep, 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 heart monitor and so forth. All this equipment surrounding his deathbed. He's in this fluorescent lighting, which makes him look like a corpse. And he's just staring at Sandler and doing this. And that image is so jarring and disturbing, and I know it's something I should have seen coming. If I feel like that joke was telegraphed in retrospect, but I should have seen it coming sooner. So Sandler sees this image of this dying old man reaching out to him while Jane Seymour is on top of him making out. I just started laughing uproariously because it's so dark and it's so out of nowhere. It's stupid as all shit, but oh my god, I wasn't expecting that weird of a turn in this movie, that I was pretty much predicting what scene was going to happen next. That one threw me for a loop, and because of that, I laughed. And it is kind of a funny little button on the scene where Sandy Wexler leaves, because he's obviously freaked out by this, and Jane Seymour looks at her dying husband like, "You pervert." And so the dude just goes, I gotta admit, you got me with that scene, Sandler. I wasn't anticipating you to freak me out like that. But that all being said, despite those 3 moments of levity I did have with this movie, I don't know if I could really recommend this. I mean, it doesn't matter. This movie's probably gonna go over well because, again, idiots like me are just curious to see either how bad or how the movie is. I mean, that's kind of what I do on this channel. I talk about movies. What do you expect me to do? I can't in good conscience say that this is worth your time watching. It is way too long. It's the most harmless of these Sandler films so far. And by harmless, I mean, it doesn't try to overly offend. This is actually, like, out of all the movies I've seen recently from him, this is the tamest when it comes to making fun of people. I mean, he still makes fun of people, but people of certain, let's say, standing in society. Really pulls his punches, I feel. And that's a kind of a good thing, but also kind of a bad thing too, because then there's nothing that really stands out with the film. Nothing good or bad. There's nothing that outrages or wins you over with this movie. It's kind of just there, and you can either take away the idea of, like, you know what, I can appreciate maybe that he's trying, but it's still not worth me recommending the film. I don't know. I want to see Sandler do stuff where he's not one of the main creative wheels. I want to see, again, something along the lines of A Punch Drunk Love, or something along the lines of Funny People. Judd Apatow actually shows up in this movie, and I'm like, oh, Judd, please convince Adam to come back to one of your films, man, please. Yeah, I'd rather see that kind of stuff from Sandler, because I do think the guy has some kind of talent if he is assertive enough to exercise it. And you can tell there's some of that assertiveness in this film. He is trying to do something with this character because it's based off of someone who I'm sure he cares deeply about. Yeah, it's a step in the right direction maybe, but I still think Sandler is best utilized when he is not in charge of the idea or of the project, when he's not one of the, like I said, one of the main creative forces behind the project. Hire him out as an actor in stuff like Punch Drunk Love and stuff like Spanglish. I think he's got another film coming up here soon where he was basically just, again, a hired talent for the production. I want to see what he does with other people's material, because there have been moments in films where he's able to turn out really good performances. While Sandy Wexler was just kind of there, yeah, one more of these Netflix things, I guess. Unless we get more. Shoot, we are probably gonna get more, aren't we? Get used to that laugh in the film if you do watch it. That's his whole shtick.